guys, it's time for our history. We're still on day 2, the 28th of week 6, and you should be on page 194 in your history. It's lesson 2, and it's called Getting Food Long Ago. Okay, so get to page 194. If you're not there, go ahead and pause and have out your practice page 31. Okay, and when you're ready, come on back. Okay, let's go ahead and read from the top. Couple key words that you're going to be talking about is crops and climate. Plants people grow for food are crops. Corn, wheat, things like that. Climate, we've talked about this. Climate is different than weather. Weather is like it's hot today, 86 degrees, something like that. Climate is what kind of weather a place has over time. We've talked about how California has a mild climate in comparison with a lot of other states. We'll get hot, warm, cold, but we don't get extremes, do we? And it doesn't last for a long time. And it depends on where you live in California, but most of California would be considered mild, right? We don't get the hurricanes and tornadoes and typhoons and things like that. And we don't really get real humidity and things that some of the other states get. So let's read together. It says, getting food long ago. Many pioneers made their homes on farms, of course, because there weren't cities yet. They used their land and their water to grow crops to feed their families. Crops were plants that people grow for food or other needs. This was they couldn't really go to grocery stores because they didn't exist yet. So there was a growing season in California. It could be long, it could be short, depending on a place's climate. Climate is the kind of weather a place has over time. In the Central Valley, you've got Bakersfield and those areas. In the Central Valley of California, the climate is hot and dry in the summer. We have a cooler climate in the summer because we live near water, don't we? We live close to the delta. So we can get hot, but it won't necessarily stay hot for 3 months out of the year. In the Central Valley, it gets hot and dry in the summer. It is mild and wet in the winter, so it's a good place for growing wheat. And so many farmers there grew wheat at that time. In the spring, the farmers would plow the fields. The plow made rows in the soil. Women and children helped plant seeds in the rows. The farmer then covered the seeds with more soil. And then you see an actual photograph of storing food for the winter in 1910. During the summer, everyone watched over their crops. They scared away animals and birds that wanted to eat the plants. The crop was very important for their survival. The farmers harvested or gathered their crops in the fall. When you harvest your crop, that means you cut down the wheat, you gather it, and you bring it in. And this would take place in the fall. They sold some of the food, but they also kept most of it for the family to eat during the winter. And then the question is, what effect did climate have on pioneer farmers? Well, climate was pretty much everything, right? Because depending on the climate, depends on how successful you were at growing your crops. Not too hot, not too cold, the crops would freeze, the crops would burn up. You'd have to watch for fires and insects and things like that. Climate, very important. Now, on the next page, it talks about problems with crops. Pioneer farmers worried about the weather. Sometimes there would be no rain for a long time and the crops would die. Bad storms could also kill the plants. Farmers also worried about insects and other hungry animals. Large swarms of grasshoppers could eat a farmer's whole crop in a single day. Rabbits and mice often ate the young plants as soon as they began to grow. When crops were ruined, some pioneer families gave up and just went back to where they had once lived. Other families were a little tougher and they stuck it out. They stayed where they were and they would just continually start over again. The question is, what might ruin a farmer's crops? What did they mention? Weather, insects, animals that would eat them. And summary, want to read that together? Long ago, people worked hard to grow the food they need. Okay, and in the little purple box, it talks about a child named Maud Van Wig. It said, it took a lot of food and work to feed a big pioneer family. Maud Van Wig lived on a farm in Ontario, California. There were 7 people in her family. She helped by collecting eggs from the chickens and milking the cows. And those days, if you were born into a pioneer family, you did work. You did a lot of work. And that you had what was called chores. And so you had jobs to do. Okay, so you can also look up Maud Van Wig and see if you can find anything about her. So if you turn the page, you see tools that they used long ago. They didn't have the technology that we have today and the mechanics and the machines. It says people who study history are called historians. Historians look at objects that people used long ago, and this helps them learn how the people lived and what tools they used to meet their needs. And if you remember, our very first field trip of the year was we went to the Clayton Historical Museum, and in those glass cases you saw some artifacts and tools and things that have been dug up around this area. First picture shows a seed planter. Farmers from long ago used these tools on their farm, a wooden plow, either pulled by hand or attached to an animal. Farmers could buy their tools from catalogs. They did not have internet. There's a hay fork and a scythe, I think, scythe. It's the C is silent, but it's obviously a blade on the end of a stick that they would harvest their wheat with. The next page shows an old-fashioned biscuit cutter, which my mother used that same looking biscuit cutter when I was growing up. People long ago also needed tools to help prepare the food that they grew. There's a food masher, there's a toaster. So obviously it's not an electric one. They would put their bread or whatever they wanted to toast on that and probably put it over an open fire. There's a fruit press and a butter churn. You might have seen those before. And getting water on the other page meant going to the well with a bucket, right? And we've talked about buffalo chips. Those little children are out picking up buffalo chips for fuel because they would use those to start a fire to burn. Remember what buffalo chips are? Buffalo poop. That was dried. They usually were mostly made out of grasses, dried grasses that were stuck together and were easy to burn, okay? So that could be your job, a pooper picker upper person, but gathering buffalo chips. So if you'll go to your practice page 31, it's entitled Pioneer Farmers, and it says, draw a line to match each farm worker to the place where he or she works on the farm. So my book is very tiny. I have to get down there real close like an old lady. So the little girl, I believe she has eggs in a little basket. Where do those eggs come from? The chicken coop. So draw a line from number 1 to D. The little boy has a little stool and a bucket. What do you think he's about to do? Yes, he's about to milk his cows. So 2 goes across to B. The woman has a larger basket and she's probably going to the fields to gather some corn. And the man with the horse or the mule is probably going to hook him up to the little wooden plow and go plow his field. And then it says, write a sentence to tell how people got their food long ago. Okay, well, how did people get their food long ago? You might say something about that. Long ago. Maybe you can start out like that. People went to Safeways. People went to Winco. No, people what? Right? People grew their own food. People grew their own food, right? And kind of animals might they eat that we still eat? Chickens. They'd raise cows for beef. They'd raise pigs for ham and bacon, pork. Long ago, people grew their own food as well as raised animals for food. Right? Unless they were vegetarians. But they would use eggs from the chicken as well as eat chickens. All I can think of is beef, cows, chicken, and pigs. Lambs. They might have eaten lamb. Okay. Geese, maybe. Go fishing if there was a little pond or a lake or a river around them. So you can go ahead and pause and copy that down. And when you do, you are finished with today's history. And you can do further investigation on your own if you'd like. Okay? So she find out a little bit more about Maud Van Wig. Be interesting to know where she came from. Okay? So we will see you tomorrow. You have a great Tuesday and rest of your day and evening. And I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.